Imagine for a moment that you are standing in your kitchen
Right.
and you are absolutely screaming your lungs out at your brother.
Oh, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
we all know that exact feeling.
Right. And it's over something completely ridiculous. Like who gets the last slice of, lukewarm day-old pizza?
The absolute lowest stakes imaginable.
Exactly. But you are saying things in that moment that, I mean, if you said them to a coworker, you wouldn't just get fired. You'd probably be like completely ostracized from polite
Oh,
society.
totally. You'd be an outcast.
You are being completely irrational, just
Yeah.
utterly uncompromising, and honestly ruthless.
Yeah.
Yet somewhere in the very back of your mind, you know with absolute certainty that tomorrow you are still going to be brothers.
Right. You'll probably even ride to work together the next morning.
Exactly. And so it begs a question. Why is the family unit the only place on earth where we can be our absolute worst, most volatile selves and yet remain entirely secure?
Well, it's actually one of the most fascinating paradoxes of human biology and sociology, really.
How so?
Because what you're describing with that pizza argument, that is a stress test. It's a stress test of the most durable social architecture we have as a species.
Okay, that makes sense. We test the boundaries.
Right.
Yeah.
We tend to think of relationships in terms of, polite negotiations.
Yeah.
But the deepest bonds are actually forged in these spaces where the normal rules of social decorum are entirely suspended.
And that exact suspension of the rules is what we are diving into today.
Yes, it's such a great topic.
Because today's deep dive is looking at this fascinating stack of linguistic and sociological notes, materials that basically deconstruct how we articulate the concepts of family and connection.
And what's really striking about these materials is the language people use.
Right, because when people describe their closest relationships, their siblings, their parents, their chosen families, they aren't using like complex academic jargon.
Not at all. They use foundational, almost elementary phrasing.
But beneath those incredibly basic words is this massive labyrinth of psychological and, honestly, evolutionary machinery.
Precisely. We're really analyzing the gap today. The gap between the simplicity of the vocabulary and the profound complexity of the underlying mechanism.
So when someone uses a seemingly mundane phrase to describe, say, their living situation,
Yeah, or just their evening routine.
right, they are actually revealing a huge amount of data.
Exactly. Data about their neurobiology, their stress responses, and how they actually survive in the modern world.
So our mission for you today is to decode that everyday language. We want to understand how the way you talk about your connections actually dictates the reality of those connections.
And how we navigate all the very real friction of modern life.
But before we can even get to the friction, we have to start at the baseline.
We have to define the core.
Right. We have to look at how these materials define the very concept of family at its absolute foundation. And, spoiler alert, they do not define it by genetics.
No, they really don't.
They don't define it by a shared last name or, a marriage certificate either.
They strip all of that away.
They do. They reduce it to two fundamental pillars: comfort and support.
Which I know on the surface sounds a bit like a greeting card sentiment.
Yeah, comfort and support sounds very, very fluffy.
Very fluffy. But if we strip away the sentimentality and we look at this through the lens of psychology, we are actually talking about the human nervous system.
Oh, wow. Okay, break that down for us.
Well, the materials we're reviewing highlight this specific universal marker of a family unit. And it's encapsulated in a very simple phrase.
Where I feel safe.
Exactly. Where I feel safe.
I want to stop right there because I really want to challenge our modern understanding of that specific word, safe.
Go for it.
Because evolutionarily speaking, when we hear the word safe, our brains are wired to picture like physical safety.
Right, like a fortified perimeter.
Yes,
Yeah.
a locked door to keep the predators out, or a cave with a fire.
Exactly.
But in the context of these sociological notes and just living in the 21st century, it feels like physical safety is sort of a given for most people tuning in.
Generally speaking, yes.
So what kind of safety are these everyday phrases actually pointing to? Because it can't just be about locked doors.
It's not. It is almost entirely about psychological safety, which biologically is fascinating.
Why is it fascinating?
Because psychological safety actually triggers the exact same neurological relief as physical safety.
Wait, really? The brain can't tell the difference.
To your nervous system, relief is relief. To understand this, we have to look at how we operate day to day. Most of our day is spent in varying degrees of sympathetic nervous system activation.
And that's the fight, flight, or freeze response, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
So when you are at work, when you are navigating heavy traffic, when you're just scrolling through a really contentious social media feed,
Oh, the social media feed is the worst for that.
it really is. But in all those situations, your brain is constantly scanning for threats. You are bracing for judgment.
Right, for failure, for social rejection.
Exactly. You are perpetually on defense.
You are constantly performing. Yes, performing. But when these notes describe family as the place where I feel safe, they are describing a literal physiological shift.
Okay.
It is the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state.
So psychological safety means the whole threat detection system can finally just power down.
Exactly. You don't have to perform anymore. You can make a mistake.
You can be incredibly irritable.
Right. You can fail spectacularly at some endeavor, and you know the underlying bond will not rupture.
And that brings up a really fascinating dynamic mentioned in the notes, this concept of unconditional support.
Yes, the phrase they use is the people who always stand by me.
Right, and that word always is doing a tremendous amount of heavy lifting there,
It really is,
because it implies a relationship that is fundamentally non-transactional.
which is huge because non-transactional relationships are incredibly rare in our lives.
They are,
Yeah.
because almost every other interaction you have is a transaction. Think about it.
Oh, absolutely. You perform well at your job, your boss gives you a paycheck, you stop performing, the relationship ends.
Right, you're pleasant to a barista, you get a coffee.
Even friendships, honestly. They can have this subtle, kind of invisible transactional ledger.
Like who texted who last.
Yes. Or who paid for dinner last time.
Exactly.
But the familial bond, and again, whether that's biological or a deeply forged chosen family, it's the one arena where that transaction is just suspended.
You are supported simply because you exist.
Which has to be an enormous cognitive relief.
Oh, it's massive.
Yeah.
Think about the sheer energy it takes to constantly maintain that ledger for all your transactional relationships.
It's exhausting.
It is. So when you have a space where you are met with what the materials call love and understanding, rather than evaluation and judgment, your brain literally conserves energy.
Because you are seeing flaws and all, and you aren't in any danger of being exiled from the tribe.
Exactly.
So if this non-transactional parasympathetic state of safety is the ultimate goal, we have to look at the physical architecture we build to house it.
The literal structures of connection.
Right, because the way we live is dramatically shifting. And the sociological data transitions from these deep emotional needs to contrasting the small family, the nuclear family, with the joint family.
And this is where the linguistic markers become almost like coordinates for our social reality.
How so?
Well, when you meet someone new, explaining your living structure is one of the first things you do.
Like saying, I live with my parents and my brother.
Right. Versus saying, I live in a joint family. By saying that, you are essentially handing them a map of your daily cognitive load.
Let's dig into that joint family concept for a second. Because we are talking about multi-generational households here, extended networks living under one roof, or, in very tight, immediate proximity.
Which is very common globally.
Right, and evolutionarily, wasn't this the default setting for human beings?
Absolutely. The anthropological history of human beings is deeply, deeply rooted in cooperative breeding and alloparenting.
We evolved in tribes, in these extended networks.
Yes. The idea of the isolated small family, just two parents, and their immediate offspring living in a walled-off suburban house.
Yeah.
That is a remarkably recent historical anomaly. It's largely driven by the Industrial Revolution and very modern economic shifts.
So when we look at that psychological safety we were just talking about, how does the structure of a joint family change the application of that safety?
That's the big question.
Because my immediate thought is that living with your parents, your grandparents, your aunt, and all your cousins under one roof, that massively increases the surface area for friction.
It really does.
So doesn't more people just mean more potential for conflict?
Mathematically, yes, it increases the friction, but it also drastically alters the distribution of emotional weight.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, think of a small nuclear family like a duet.
A duetto.
Two adults, perhaps a couple of children. It requires intense, flawless synchronization.
Right, because there's only two of you playing the song.
Exactly. If one adult in that duet has a crisis, say they lose their job, they get sick, they suffer from depression, the music basically stops
The entire system is immediately threatened.
because there is no redundancy.
Oh, it's a single point of failure.
Precisely. Now, compare that to a joint family. A joint family operates much more like a full orchestra.
Okay, I like this analogy.
If the second violinist is out of tune or missing entirely, the collective sound of the orchestra just carries on.
Because there are other violins?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The emotional safety net is much wider. If you are a child feeling low and your mother is entirely depleted from work, you have an aunt right there.
Or a grandfather or an older cousin.
Right. The support is communal, which makes it highly, highly resilient.
But here the trade-off is the sheer volume of micro-negotiations.
Oh, absolutely.
Because in an orchestra, ensuring everyone is playing the same song requires an active conductor in constant daily compromise.
It's a lot of management.
It is. You are managing varying authority dynamics. You have to navigate your own parents' rules while also respecting the cultural authority of a grandparent.
Right.
While also dealing with the territorial disputes of, like, sharing a bathroom with your cousins.
Exactly. The cognitive load of tracking all those relationships must be immense.
It has to be.
It taps into something called Dunbar's number.
Dunbar's number.
Yeah, it's a cognitive limit to the number of people with whom we can maintain stable, meaningful social relationships.
Interesting.
So in a joint family, a significant portion of your cognitive bandwidth is dedicated simply to maintaining harmony within that immediate environment.
Just keeping the peace takes brain power.
Yes.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Whether you are managing the intense, high-stakes duet of a small family or that sprawling, complex orchestra of a joint family,
Yeah.
the materials point to a universal truth. The structure itself does not guarantee the bond.
So the container is just the container.
Exactly. A house is just a house.
What actually determines the strength of the relationships inside that container is the daily maintenance.
Yes. And this brings us to a crucial shift in our understanding of these relationships.
Because the notes identify highly specific, actionable habits required to keep the structure from collapsing.
They do. And they summarize these habits with a phrase that I think, honestly, has been dangerously diluted in modern culture.
Which is?
Quality time.
Oh, yeah, quality time. We hear that and we immediately picture grand cinematic gestures.
Right. A surprise anniversary trip to Paris.
Exactly. Or a massive, perfectly curated holiday dinner where everyone is wearing matching sweaters.
But the notes completely reject that idea.
They really do. They define quality time as sitting together in the evening, sharing the events of the day, and enjoying routine meals together.
It is the ritualization of the mundane.
The mundane.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we really have to examine why the mundane is so powerful here.
Let's do it. Let's look at the concept of sharing the events of the day, because on the surface, it sounds boring. How was work? Fine.
Right, but in psychology, specifically in the research pioneered by relationship experts like John Gottman, this is referred to as making and responding to bids for connection.
Okay, bids for connection. Explain that mechanically. What is actually happening there?
A bid is basically any attempt from one person to another for attention, affirmation, affection, or any positive connection.
So it doesn't have to be deep.
Not at all. It can be as simple as pointing out a bird out the window or saying, "Ugh, you won't believe the email my boss just sent."
Okay.
When you sit down in the evening and share your day, you are exchanging dozens of these bids.
And how you react is the key.
Exactly. If the other person turns toward the bid, meaning they listen, they validate, they engage, the relationship is reinforced.
But if they turn away?
If they turn away, like they just stare at their phone or they grunt dismissively, the bond physically weakens.
So it's not just a debriefing of facts. You're not just giving a status report.
No, it is an emotional synchronization.
That is the perfect way to phrase it. Emotional synchronization.
I think so too.
Because, you know, I used to think of maintaining a relationship like watering a plant.
That's the common analogy.
Right. But based on what you were saying, that is way too passive of a metaphor.
How would you describe it?
It is much more like updating the operating system on your phone.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. Because every single day, you and your partner or you and your sibling, you have new experiences.
Yeah.
You face new frustrations, you learn new things, your opinions shift slightly.
You are accumulating new data constantly.
Yes. You are literally a slightly different person by Friday than you were on Monday.
That's very true.
And if you do not sit down in the evening and share your day, if you don't sync your devices,
Yeah.
so to speak, you start operating on different versions of the software.
You get out of sync.
Right.
Yeah.
You lack the context for why they are suddenly irritable about a specific topic.
Which leads to friction.
Exactly. Misunderstandings happen not because we stop loving each other, but because we become incompatible with the current version of the other person.
And this synchronization is exactly why the materials place such a heavy emphasis on the shared meal.
The family dinner.
Right. Across almost every human culture, the sharing of food is the ultimate bonding ritual.
But mechanically, why is that? Why food?
It goes right back to our discussion on the nervous system.
The parasympathetic state?
Yes. When you sit down to eat a heavy, satisfying meal, your body must activate the parasympathetic nervous system to process the food.
The rest and digest state.
Exactly. You literally cannot be in a state of high alert, fight or flight panic while successfully digesting a large meal.
Oh, wow. Because your body needs the energy for digestion.
Right. The biological act of eating forces vulnerability.
It forces you to drop your guard.
Yes. By synchronizing this biological vulnerability with the people in your home, you are chemically reinforcing the psychological safety of the group.
That is wild.
It's basic biology.
And the notes are very clear that this maintenance, this synchronization, it applies to every sphere of life.
It's not just for a biological family.
No, it specifically extends to friends, partners, and colleagues.
Right.
Obviously, you aren't having a traditional family dinner with your accounting department.
That would be a bit strange.
It would.
Huh.
But the underlying mechanism, the required effort, the regular check-ins to prevent the operating systems from drifting apart, that remains identical.
It does.
Huh.
But here is where we must confront a really tough reality.
Uh-oh. What's that?
Even if you share your day perfectly, even if you eat every single meal together and turn toward every single bid for connection,
Yeah.
the synchronization will eventually fail.
Because we are human.
Exactly. Human beings are distinct, autonomous entities. Friction is an absolute guarantee.
Which brings us to the most counterintuitive and, frankly, the most profound insight in these sociological notes.
The mechanics of conflict.
Yes,
Yeah.
because the materials do not frame arguments as a failure of the relationship.
Which is how most people view fights.
Right. But they state plainly that having different opinions is entirely normal, and that navigating those differences is exactly how relationships grow stronger.
This completely upends the traditional view that a good relationship is a peaceful relationship.
Right, the idea that you should never fight.
A relationship without conflict is usually a relationship where one or both parties are hiding their true selves just to avoid rocking the boat.
It's fragile.
It is deeply fragile. The psychological concept here is rupture and repair.
Rupture and repair. Okay, so the conflict is the rupture.
Yes. When two people inevitably clash, the bond ruptures.
It breaks a little bit.
But the magic, the actual strengthening of the emotional muscle, does not happen in the absence of the rupture. It happens during the repair.
And the notes highlight a very specific protocol for this repair.
Yes, they do.
Acknowledging different opinions, talking calmly, and actively listening.
It sounds simple, but it's incredibly hard to do in the moment.
It is. I want to dissect that phrase, we have different opinions. Because saying that in the middle of a heated argument feels almost too simple to work. Like if I'm yelling at you and you just say, well, we have different opinions, that might make me more mad.
Right, it can sound dismissive if done wrong.
So mechanically, what is happening in the brain when someone successfully validates an opposing viewpoint without necessarily conceding their own?
It acts as an emergency brake on the amygdala.
The amygdala, that's the fear center.
Exactly. When you are in an argument, your amygdala perceives the other person's disagreement not just as an intellectual debate,
How does it perceive it?
as an existential threat to your status, to your ego, or to your reality.
Uh-huh.
Your brain literally prepares for war.
So you stop hearing their actual words and you just see an enemy.
Yes. But when you pause and say, I hear you, and we clearly have different opinions on this, you are executing a high-level cognitive maneuver.
Validation.
Yes, validation. You are not saying you are right.
Right. You aren't giving in.
You are saying your perception of reality is valid to you, and I acknowledge it. And what does that do to their brain?
Instantly, the other person's brain registers that they are not under attack. They are not being erased.
Wow.
The threat level drops. The amygdala de-escalates. And the prefrontal cortex, the logical reasoning part of the brain, can finally come back online.
That is incredible. Validation is basically an override code for the fight or flight response.
It really is.
And this brings us right back to that opening scenario. The screaming match over the pizza.
The classic sibling rivalry.
Exactly. Because the notes highlight sibling fights as a prime example of conflict coexisting with deep care.
Siblings are nature's ultimate psychological sandbox.
A sandbox, I love that.
Think about the evolutionary environment of siblings. They share 50% of their genetic material.
Right, so there's a baseline of invested survival. You want them to survive.
Yes, but they are also actively competing for the exact same finite resources.
Parental attention, food, territory within the home.
Exactly. It is a built-in biological rivalry. But because of that foundational non-transactional safety we discussed earlier, the unconditional support sibling relationships become a safe training ground for conflict resolution.
You can test the absolute limits of your aggression.
You can practice dominance, you can practice submission,
You can experiment with negotiation tactics.
all without the fear that the relationship will permanently terminate.
Right. The rupture can be massive.
Yeah.
You can say horrible things, but the repair is almost structurally guaranteed.
Because you learn how to fight fair when you have to share a bathroom the next morning.
Exactly. You are forced to develop what psychologists call a theory of mind.
Which is what?
The understanding that another person has beliefs, desires, and intentions that are completely different from your own.
And that they aren't just an extension of you.
Right. The skills forged in the fires of childhood sibling arguments, the ability to talk calmly after an explosion, the ability to actually listen,
Yeah.
those become the blueprint for how we handle friction with romantic partners and colleagues later in life.
So we have this ancient, beautifully complex machinery.
Magoo.
We have the neurological safety of the pack. We have the structures of joint and small families. We have the daily biological synchronization of shared meals. And we have the evolutionary sandbox of conflict and repair.
It's a robust system.
It is. And for thousands of years, the system worked relatively well. But the notes introduce a new catastrophic variable.
They do. A very modern dilemma.
A dilemma that is threatening to dismantle all of this architecture we just talked about.
And that variable is summarized by a single, deceptively simple word:
Busyness.
busyness.
The text states that relationships are fundamentally changing today because people are increasingly busy and caught up in their own life.
Right.
And I really, really want to challenge this narrative.
Okay, challenge it.
Are we actually busier?
That's a great question.
Because if we look at human history, a subsistence farmer in the 1800s was performing back-breaking physical labor from dawn until dusk.
Oh, absolutely.
A mother in a pre-industrial joint family was managing a level of domestic labor that is almost unimaginable to us today. Making clothes, fetching water, tending crops.
It was nonstop.
So are we doing more physical work than they were?
No, we are absolutely not. The caloric expenditure and the sheer hours of physical labor have plummeted for the average person.
Then what does it mean to be caught up in our own life? If we aren't physically busier, what is actually pulling us apart?
Well, what's your theory?
I propose it is not a lack of time. It is a lack of undivided attention. We are not busier, we are infinitely more distracted.
You have hit on the defining psychological crisis of our era.
Really?
Yes, the sociological term for this is continuous partial attention.
Continuous partial attention. That sounds exhausting.
It is. Historically, when the sun went down and the physical labor ended, you gathered around the fire or the table.
Right.
The quality time happened by default
Mm.
because there was literally no alternative competing for your sensory engagement.
You had to look at each other. You had to talk. Or just sit in silence together.
Exactly. Today, the environment is structurally engineered to pull our attention away from the people physically closest to us.
It's designed that way.
Yes. When the notes say people are caught up in their own life, it means we are each carrying a portal to a hyper-personalized, algorithmically optimized universe right in our pockets.
The smartphone.
The smartphone.
So we can be sitting in the exact same room, occupying the exact same physical structure, whether that's a joint family or a small family, and be experiencing completely different psychological realities.
Yes. It is geographic proximity masking mental isolation.
Geographic proximity masking mental isolation. That is a chilling thought.
And this mental isolation is physically destructive to the bond. Let's go back to John Gottman's bids for connection.
Okay, let's look at a modern bid.
Imagine your partner makes a bid. They say, hey, look at this ridiculous article.
Right.
But you are caught up in your own life. You are scrolling through a work email on your phone.
Or looking at social media.
Exactly. And you offer a distracted, without even looking up.
Which we are all guilty of.
We all do it. You might think you were just multitasking. But neurologically, Your partner's brain registers a micro-rejection.
A micro-rejection.
Yep.
Because giving someone time without giving them attention is an empty gesture.
It is. It doesn't trigger the parasympathetic nervous system. It doesn't sync the operating systems.
Because time is merely the prerequisite. Attention is the actual currency of connection.
That's beautifully put.
When you withhold attention, you are starving the relationship of its required nourishment, even if you are sitting 3 feet away on the same couch.
Exactly.
Which makes the directive from these materials so incredibly urgent.
They are very clear on this.
They state unequivocally, relationships need time and attention.
It is a demand for profound intentionality.
Because in a world where the attention economy is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, an industry literally designed to harvest your focus, spending undivided time with your family or friends is no longer something that just happens.
No, it's not the default anymore.
It is an act of rebellion.
It really is. It requires immense structural friction. You have to aggressively protect the ritual of the shared meal.
Phones away from the table.
Yes. You have to willingly endure the boredom of an evening without screens to force the sharing of the day's events.
You have to choose to engage in the rupture and repair of conflict rather than just retreating into the frictionless comfort of a digital feed.
Because the feed is always easier.
Always. You cannot let connection just happen anymore. You have to actively forge it.
And that is the ultimate synthesis of these everyday phrases we've been looking at.
How so?
Well, when you consciously say, we need to spend some quality time, you are not just suggesting a fun activity.
Right.
You are recognizing a drift in your operating systems and initiating a synchronization protocol.
I love that.
And when you pause during a fight and say, I understand we have different opinions, you are not just being polite.
No.
You are deploying a neurological override to preserve psychological safety.
So the language we use to describe our bonds is the exact toolkit we use to build them.
Precisely. Our vocabulary is the architecture.
Wow. Okay. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, navigating this complex web of human connection right now?
It's a lot to process.
It is. But if we distill this vast exploration down to its absolute essence, the blueprint for a resilient bond relies on 3 things.
A relentless commitment to psychological safety.
The daily maintenance of attention.
And the courage to repair after a rupture.
Exactly. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought.
Okay.
Something for you to deeply analyze in the quiet moments of your own life today.
Let's hear it.
We spent a lot of time discussing how the simple action of sharing your day acts as the crucial maintenance mechanism for a relationship.
Right, the syncing of the OS.
Yes. So look at the architecture of your own life. Look at the person you consider your closest ally.
Your sibling, your partner, your best friend.
Whoever it is. If you are forced to describe the profound, complex weight of that entire relationship using only one simple, everyday action, what would that single defining action be?
That is the ultimate diagnostic question.
Because it is never in the grand declarations where our true bonds live.
No, it's not.
It is in the microscopic daily choices of where we place our attention. Until next time, keep diving deep.